Okay, we're going to speed run connecting the Decis API to Google Sheets and see if we can do it in under 2.5 minutes. So once I've logged into the dashboard, I can do a lot of the work to start with here. So the first thing is I select my coverage. I've got these 3 countries selected here. I can change that using the edit coverage option. Unless you're on the unlimited plan, you are going to set your countries here. Those are pre-configured in the payload and that gets sent across. You don't need to do any configuration in the code. The next thing I'm going to do is go into the documentation and scroll down. There's a whole explanation here of what we're doing, but I want this code snippet here. So I would select all of this code and copy it and then go over to Google Sheets. So in the dashboard, I've set my coverage, I've got my documentation. The credentials that I need are the credentials that I use for the dashboard. So when I come over to Google Sheets, I'm going to go click on extensions and app script, and that's going to bring me into the app script editor. Now, when I did this the first time, or when you do this the first time, it'll just say function and it'll open and close the function. Delete everything on that page and paste in all of the code from the documentation. So once that is there, the final thing that you would have to do to set this up, so we paste it in and then we go to line 6 and we're going to add our username. So that's my username. And then I'm going to put in my password. And once that's done and saved, every time it goes to the endpoint, it'll check my credentials, confirm those, figure out what the payload should be based on my country coverage, and pull that into Google Sheets. Now I can then run this either manually. I can just click run once I've saved it, or I can go over here and I can select a time trigger. And if I add a new trigger, I can just come down here on the event source and select time driven. Now keep in mind, every time you access the endpoint, every country that you pull is one API call. So if you were to run this every hour for say 10 countries, that's 240 calls a day. You don't need to run it every hour. We don't update the information that frequently. For most people, once a day would be fine. But just keep that in mind. If you run it too frequently, you will start to eat up on your allowance, your credit allowance. So back over here with the code, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this, put in my password, and then we will run it and see what happens. So now I've hit run and the execution has started, and we'll see what's going on in the execution log at the bottom. This is when you're doing it manually. If it were happening on a time trigger, you wouldn't see this part. So I can see everything's working down here. I can see my information. And when I go back to the Google Sheet, now all of the information's been pulled across. So I've got my country, India, the stability rating, the news, and then more turbulent than usual. So all that worked. It took just under 3 minutes. You will see that this is set up in Markdown. So what I'm going to do is quickly select all of the news here and just try something different. So I'm opening up new Google Doc. And then when I'm in here, I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to wait for this paste from Markdown. And just wait a second. Once that's highlighted, it means it's recognized that what's in my clipboard is Markdown. And when I paste this in, you'll see that all of the formatting here has now been brought over, and we have the hyperlinks. So if I want to see what's going on, I can read this story, and that's going to bring me into the source itself. So although it looks maybe perhaps a little messy in the spreadsheet, this gives us all the functionality that we're looking for. So as a quick recap, we're going to do our figure out our coverage over here. We can get the code from the documentation and then go over to Google Sheets, set up our app script, and then we're going to add our credentials to the app script. And once that's running, we'll be able to see it's running here as a test, and then you can always go over and set up a time trigger so that you can access this on a schedule that works for you.